What we have here is the window operator actuator assembly. What I'm doing is I'm combining a couple of repairs. So just recently, what I did was I had to put some new silicone in here, and this is attached into the window, and then this bolts to our runner here. I'm combining this repair with a repair where I'd fix these rollers here. Well, mine were still intact. There wasn't a problem there. We didn't have any trouble, but since we're rebuilding everything, we took it all apart, cleaned it, painted it, and now we're gonna reassemble everything. When this is on the window, you wanna try and pry in there and basically get your screwdriver on this edge if you can, and then just use a hammer, and then you're pounding this out of the window. And if you're gentle about it, you should be able to remove both of those fairly easily. Inside the channel in there is going to be your adhesive that sticks to the window, so you're going to have to clean all that out of there. And then what we'll do is when we reassemble this, we'll use some silicone that has temperature extremes so that it'll handle the heat and it'll also handle the cold. I did that on another Jeep, and so far it's worked very well. Another common problem is these plastic, this one I guess is still intact here. You can see there's just a little chunk missing out of that thing. But basically what happens is these nylon or plastic, these Teflon rollers, they end up cracking and breaking, and that's what's happened here. So these were cracked, but they ended up breaking when I was removing them for replacement. So this is the pin that's fastened onto the track, and then this is that nylon bushing that goes in around that pin there. So if we take a look on this side here, that's where those rollers are going to be, those bushings. And so what you do is you just want to grind the end off of here, and then you're going to hammer that through. I ended up breaking off that plastic Teflon piece, and then I put a socket that fits around this. And then so this will be like that, and then you'll just have this socket support that part there, and then you pound that out with a punch and get that out of there. Now once you've got that out of there, what I did was I took a tap and I tapped the hole out to 1/4 inch, and what I'm using is these Allen head bolts here. That's going to thread into that hole right there, and that's going to hold this where we need it to be when we tack weld it back on the new roller. A comparison here is this is the Allen head bolt that I'm using, and I ended up shaving that down. By comparison there, I reduced the length there on the head so it'll fit inside of our bushing. So this is the bushing that we've made here, which is basically a replica of what came out of there. This is bored out about 3/8 so that it'll accept the head of the Allen head bolt there. And there's also clearance in there as well, because you want clearance. The hole in the center is 1/4 inch to match the fastener as well. And then we've machined these two ends here. So I do believe, if we're going by numbers, it's about 650 for the large diameter and 400 for the small diameter. So that's the specs on the bushing. And then what happens is we got our bolt that goes through. And so then our bolt, that's all you're seeing on the end there. So you need that like that so it'll fit into the runner. Here's one of our runners here, and then it'll just go in here, and then you're just gonna slide it, and you're gonna make sure you got lots of clearance. So we got lots of wiggle in here so that it's not gonna get stuck, hopefully. It'll ride up and down the track like it's supposed to. The second thing that I did was on the ends here, there's these little, if you can see the little cuts there, those get bent down, and those are your stoppers for your bushing as it ends its travel at the end here. When those are pressed down, it'll stop it right there. What I did was I just drilled a hole on both sides, on that side and this side. And the purpose for that hole is I just got a number 6 machine screw, and that'll go through the hole. Once that's through the hole there, then I just got a nylon locker nut that'll go on there, and then this is the new stop, so it'll stop there. And then you can remove this at any time if ever you needed to disassemble it while it's still in the vehicle or outside the vehicle or whatever you need to do there. We go back here and we fasten it in, we screw it in from the other side because we've tapped the hole there, and then we get it to where we want it. And you see how I've put that clearance in? I purposely put that amount of clearance in there so that this will spin freely and it's not going to get bound up or anything like that. What I did was I tacked it with the welder, then I cut off the excess, and then I finished weld the top here. So a new improvement that I've come up with is I also disconnected this from here. This gets connected to there so that our teeth will ride in here, and then our actuator gets bolted on the other side of this with the pinion gear that operates the teeth on here. It should be installed like this. So this will go on top of there, and those teeth ride through that space there. If we look here, you can see where I used the grinder and I ground off the head of this pin here. And once I removed it, what I did was, here it is. So that end would have been right there, mushroomed over. So I ground that off. Then I center drilled it and I tapped it to 1/4 inch. That still goes in there and gets locked into that slot. But now, instead of it being mushroomed over or welded, fastened here, we're just using a bolt to do the same thing. So this bolt will go down and thread into there, and then the threads stop at this slot because this is where the big spring goes in to hold it all together. I'm going to use this little bearing that I found, and I'm going to put that bearing in there. There's an improvement for operating this thing. Bolted that up there. We used a little bit of this blue Loctite because I didn't tighten this too tight. You got to go by feel so that this thing is still going to turn nice. And it turns, and then what happens is it rides up against this piece of metal here. Well, this is where that actuator is going to go in here. So we have yet to bolt that on with the pinion to engage into there. This part is done. If we take a look in there, that bearing actually looks pretty good for clearance and for alignment purposes and everything like that. Like, everything lines up really well, and I think that's going to support that good. And then on the bottom there, that is where that bolt goes flush to the bottom. You can see some of that blue Loctite there. You're going to want to grease that bearing. You don't want to leave it dry. Grease these sliding components so they'll work better and they'll keep longer. Got the actuator bolted on there, and again, we want to grease up our pinion where it engages the teeth here. The last thing we'll do before we install this is we'll put some grease on here for the teeth and for where it rides up against there. We're not going to do that yet because we've got some more things to assemble and we don't want to get dirty. So yeah, just bolt these on. It only really goes on one way. The pinion engages the teeth. I do not believe you have to mark or worry about location, because this thing will just continue to drive one way or drive the other way. And you have this as the stopper here for the one way, and I'm not sure for the other. It would probably be the stoppers in the tracks that prevent it from going any further. With this flipped over now, the next thing we need to do is we need to install our spring. Here's the spring installed here. That tang fits that center pin here, and then I just use some needle nose pliers and I just pull this over until we get it to catch on the catch there. This is kind of like what it's going to be in the vehicle. The operator, the actuator is up over on this side here. This is our back runner, which is going to go up and down on the back side, and that's going to be fastened to the window with those two things there. We just engaged our rollers inside the track here on both sides, and then we put our bolts in with those nylon locks there. So we got nylon lock on both sides, and those are our stops. The next thing is to attach this runner here to this roller, and again we're going to use our bolt, and that's going to be our stopper there. Got that last piece on there. One last thing to do is to check to make sure everything's operating well. Both of these are sliding in the track like they're supposed to. And one last thing to do before we put this into the vehicle is we want to put some grease into these runners. Maybe squeeze a little grease in there for that pivot point there. And once we've greased things up, and again on our gearing over here, once we've greased everything all up, then we can put it into the vehicle. So I've got the window taped from the inside, and that's what's going to hold that window up while we're doing all this work on here. And all that is some Scotch tape. Get Scotch tape, duct tape, something. I use this Scotch tape because it's easier to clean the window afterwards rather than duct tape. Now here on the inside, we've got everything bolted up, and we've got our 2 bolts there, and those are going to be for that one runner. You can see the other runner in the back. And then we've got 4 bolts here for our actuator, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Once you get everything all lined up and all the bolts started, then you can tighten that all in. After I tighten that in, I just got the key on, and then I'm running the window up and down. Now's the time to do that, because once I put that silicone into those little pockets that are going to fasten to the window, we got to let that set for 24 hours. So now's the time to test everything, make sure it's all good. Then I'm going to get our pieces that are going to go into the bottom of the window here. We got those 2 pieces, and then they bolt in there. There's 1 bolt there and another bolt over here. You see in that window there, I have it lined up where I can bolt it together. And then again over here, I've purposely lined up that runner right there for the next part for installing the window. Here are those window pockets here, and the window will rest inside there. So we've filled that saddle full of silicone. And as long as you find a silicone that has those temperature extremes, like an all-purpose silicone. So we've got -76 to 400 Fahrenheit. That's going to maintain its grip on that window in the cold and hot. And so we just fill that silicone inside the pocket there. We're going to line everything up and get that started on the window, and then we'll use the window actuator to drive that up tight into the window and hold it closed. We've rolled that window up all the way tight to hold that into place, and what I actually did was those 2 brackets that fasten onto the window, and then they bolt into the track. I left the nuts loose on that so that when it finds itself up the top there, nice and tight, when we let it down in a day or 2, we can put a final tighten on those nuts. I just wanted to leave them loose so that they would kind of go where they wanted to go. But there's one last thing we need to put on here, and that's our track here for the window, for the back part of the window. Now this one here is for the passenger side, just so you can see what it looks like. And it actually fits in here. This piece here will clip into the existing track in the window. That should be approximately in here somewhere. And then you line up these 2 holes here, and you just bolt it up, those 2 bolts, and that should be the end of it. Got everything reassembled here, and we're just checking the window, make sure everything works as it should. So we're just going to roll down the window here, and you can see that everything's working good. One thing to kind of notice is the track goes all the way just before touching the bottom of the door down here. Now, I do believe that is because there's a stopper on the other end of this actuator here. So once it hits that stopper, that's what stops it from hitting the bottom piece. What you need to kind of take notice is this is the bracket for the window, and it needs to be put in the right spot. So there's one here, and there's the other one there. And so what I did was I just went off of the passenger door. I measured off the edge of the window to here. It was less than 2 inches. I don't remember the exact measurement. And then what I did was I measured from the edge of that one to the edge of this one. And I think I was in around 10 3/4 distance there. The last thing that I did to make sure that these were glued in the right spot was I measured from the nut there, the installation nut, to this one, and I made sure that that was the right distance apart, so that when you assemble the window to the track, everything's going to fit. One other thing to notice is this track has to be installed correctly. If you have it backwards, that's what happened to me. I had this end over there, what happens is when you're rolling the window up, it'll stop to about here, and it won't close to the top because the track is upside down or backwards or whatever you want to call it. What I had to do was I just had to disassemble the track, flip it, and then reassemble it, and now the window will operate all the way up and all the way down. So we're all the way up, all the way down.